November 29, 1944. South of Japan, the Pacific was silent and black, a surface of glass stretching to the horizon. Out of that darkness, a single shape moved vast and slow, its bulk breaking the surface like a moving island. It was not a cruiser or a battleship, but something greater. 70,000 tons of armored steel, the largest aircraft carrier the world had ever seen. Her name was Shinano. In Tokyo, the Admirals called her the Empire's rebirth, a fortress that could carry planes, fuel, and repair ships at sea. To her builders, she was the answer to humiliation. 2 years earlier, Japan's carrier fleet had been shattered at Midway, 4 carriers lost in one day. Since then, the Empire had lived under the shadow of American bombers and submarines. Shinano was meant to lift that shadow. She was built upon the armored hull of a Yamato-class battleship, with armor so thick that engineers boasted she could survive a dozen torpedo hits. To the Admiralty, she was proof that Japan could still create miracles of steel even as factories burned and fuel ran dry. But the miracle was unfinished. In the shipyards of Yokosuka, welders worked through sleepless nights under blackout conditions. The air stank of oil and wet paint. Sparks showered from the decks as work crews rushed to meet impossible deadlines. When she was ordered to sail, half her bulkheads were still unsealed. Hundreds of watertight doors had never been tested. Her radar was incomplete. Even her pumps were being assembled as she was being fueled. The men aboard knew it. Many were not sailors at all, but shipyard workers, engineers, and mechanics still installing equipment. Yet the order from Tokyo was absolute: she must move. American reconnaissance planes had already photographed the harbor, and High Command feared an air raid could destroy her before she even touched open sea. So on the evening of November 28th, Shinano eased from her moorings, her massive hull gliding into the night. She was escorted by 3 destroyers, Isokaze, Yukikaze, and Hamakaze, but even they could feel the unease. The ship's lights were dim, her decks wet with rain, her engines groaning under their own weight. From a distance, she looked unstoppable, a moving continent of steel. Up close, she looked unfinished, raw, alive, only through the will of men who refused to surrender. For Admiral Toyota, Shinano symbolized faith. For the welders who had built her, she was exhaustion turned into metal. For history, she would become something else entirely. Beneath that black ocean, an American submarine was waiting, unseen, patient, and silent. In 17 hours, the Empire's greatest ship would become its greatest loss. Do you believe size alone can decide strength in war? Comment 1 if you agree, or like this video if you think otherwise. By late 1944, Japan's empire was running on fumes. The map still showed red across the Pacific, but those red lines were illusions drawn by men who refused to accept that their fleets were crippled, their skies dominated, and their factories burning. Every day, American B-29s flew deeper into the home islands, turning steel works, oil refineries, and rail yards into twisted ruins. Every night, the glow of those fires was visible from Tokyo Bay. Yet even as the empire crumbled, its admirals clung to symbols. To them, steel was faith. The heavier the armor, the stronger the spirit. The larger the ship, the greater the hope. And in that faith, the Shinano was born not from logic, but from desperation. Originally laid down as the 3rd Yamato-class battleship, her massive hull had been meant to carry 9 18-inch guns, each the size of a railway car. But by 1943, Japan had learned a bitter lesson. Battleships were no longer the masters of the sea. The skies ruled now. The air, not armor, decided who lived and who died. So in secret, engineers at Yokosuka converted the unfinished battleship into a floating fortress, a support carrier that would serve as a mobile repair base, ammunition depot, and refueling ship for other carriers. On paper, it was genius, an indestructible nerve center to keep Japan's dwindling fleet alive. In reality, it was a contradiction, a carrier too heavy to maneuver, too slow to escape, and too incomplete to fight. The engineers knew it. They could see the contradictions welded into her steel. Her armor belt was 8 inches thick, heavier than any carrier ever built, but her watertight compartments were misaligned. Her aviation fuel tanks were unprotected. Her flight deck armor was so massive, it made the ship top-heavy, threatening stability. To the Admirals, none of that mattered. They had lost at Midway. They had lost at the Philippine Sea. They could not lose faith as well. And so, while Tokyo's streets starved and fuel convoys vanished under American torpedoes, the Shinano consumed what was left of Japan's industrial strength: 10,000 workers, 40,000 tons of high-grade steel, and millions of gallons of precious diesel. Inside the shipyard, the mood was both proud and haunted. Welders worked through air raids, sparks falling like snow as the city shook. The sound of hammering never stopped, not even when sirens screamed. A single bomb could have ended it all, but they kept building. To them, this ship was proof that Japan still mattered, that the empire could still create something the Americans could not sink. But the numbers told another story. By the time Shinano was launched, Japan's daily oil supply had fallen below 10% of pre-war levels. Its aircraft production was collapsing. Its skilled laborers were gone, replaced by teenagers and exhausted civilians. Even the ship's own crew was only half-trained, 1/3 sailors, 1/3 shipyard workers, and 1/3 untested recruits. To outsiders, Shinano was the last monument of a nation still pretending it could win. She was not built for war, but for memory, a steel prayer to the gods of the sea. Admirals toured her decks, touching the cold armor with pride, whispering to each other that no torpedo can pierce this hull. One officer called her a ship that will live forever. But forever was no longer measured in years. It was measured in hours. When she left Yokosuka, the ship still reeked of primer and paint. The watertight doors had never been pressurized. The communication lines between compartments were incomplete, forcing officers to use runners to carry orders by hand. Her radar systems were half-calibrated. Her bulkheads had gaps wide enough for seawater to flood through. Every man aboard knew the risk. None dared say it aloud. In a nation where defeat was shame, silence was survival. They told themselves the ship's armor would protect them, that Japanese steel would endure where others failed. It was the same illusion that had driven the empire for years, the belief that bravery could replace resources, that faith could replace oil. When Shinano's bow cut into open water, Admiral Toyota and his staff watched from shore. Behind them, the fires of Tokyo flickered through the clouds. Ahead of them, the ocean was empty. Somewhere beyond that horizon waited an enemy they could no longer see, but could always feel, a machine-driven force powered by factories that never slept. As Shinano disappeared into the darkness, one engineer wrote in his journal, "She is magnificent, but she is already dead." Do you think pride is the last thing to die when empires fall? Comment 1 if you agree, or like this video if you don't. Far below the same black water that carried Shinano south, another vessel moved smaller, quieter, and infinitely more dangerous. The USS Archerfish, a Balao-class submarine, had been patrolling the approaches to Tokyo Bay for days. Inside her narrow steel hull, 80 men lived in a world of constant noise and tension. The endless thrum of engines, the hiss of compressed air, the metallic ping of sonar bouncing off unseen walls of water. The air smelled of oil sweat and stale coffee. Paint flaked from the bulkheads. Every breath carried the taste of diesel and fear. Her commander, Lieutenant Commander Joseph F. Enright, stood in the control room staring at the chart table. He was a man haunted by hesitation. 2 years earlier, He had been relieved of his first command after failing to attack a major enemy ship. The shame had followed him ever since. Now, in November 1944, he had been given another chance, and he was determined not to let it slip. "We've been ghosts long enough," he told his exec. "Time to make some noise." But for a submarine, noise was death. That night, just after 8 p.m., the radar operator broke the monotony. A faint echo appeared on the screen, large, distant, and moving fast. It didn't match any known convoy pattern. Enright leaned over the scope, studying the trace. The contact zigzagged every few minutes, a sign of a high-value target under escort. "Whatever she is," Enright said quietly, "she's worth following." He ordered the Archer fish to battle stations and turned to shadow the unknown giant. For the next 6 hours, the submarine crept through the Pacific, matching every turn, every change of speed. The crew moved with deliberate precision. Each whisper, each adjustment of ballast was calculated to avoid detection. In the sonar room, the operator listened to the faint pulse of propellers, slow, heavy, and deep. "She's big," he murmured, "real big." The sonar pings came back with an echo unlike anything they had heard before, a metallic mass that seemed to fill the ocean itself. Enright's instincts told him this was no freighter. He'd seen cruisers, destroyers, even small carriers, but nothing that produced this kind of acoustic footprint. The vessel was traveling at nearly 20 knots, zigzagging every 15 minutes. It was being shadowed by at least 3 destroyers. The risk was enormous. A single mistake could mean a barrage of depth charges, and no one survived that near Japan's coast. But Enright also knew what this moment meant. Somewhere ahead was redemption or failure again. He took the Archer fish to periscope depth. The lens broke the surface, sending ripples through the Black Sea. In the faint moonlight, he saw it, a dark silhouette, immense, featureless, stretching across the horizon. It was too large for a cruiser, too fast for a transport. Its outline was strange, flat across the top, rising sharply at the bow. Enright's heart pounded. "That's no cargo ship," he whispered. "That's a carrier." He radioed the contact to headquarters using a coded burst. The message vanished into static. No guidance came back. He was alone. The destroyers guarding the carrier shifted formation, their searchlights cutting arcs through the fog. Enright made his decision. We stay with her all night. We wait for her to turn. Then we strike. Hours passed. Men dozed at their stations, the air growing thick and hot. Every 30 minutes, Enright raised the periscope for another brief look. The target's silhouette loomed closer, her escorts weaving behind like shadows tethered to a monster. The commander marked each turn with his stopwatch, plotting her course on the chart. Every movement brought them closer to the perfect firing angle. By 3 a.m., the opportunity came. The giant turned southeast, exposing her starboard side, a broad, vulnerable flank. The range was ideal, the escorts momentarily out of position. Enright took a breath. "Standby tubes 1 through 6, he ordered. The crew fell silent. They could hear their own hearts in the stillness. He waited until the crosshairs settled across the dark outline. Then his voice broke the tension. Fire. 6 torpedoes left their tubes in rapid succession, each a silver trail of compressed air slicing into the darkness. The men counted the seconds, 45 to impact. In the control room, no one moved. 40 seconds, 30, 20. Then it came 4 explosions, one after another, deep and heavy, rolling through the hull like distant thunder. The lights flickered as the shock waves hit. Someone whispered, "Got her," but Enright said nothing. He ordered a deep dive and turned away the submarine, sinking into the blackness as the last echoes faded. No depth charges followed, no pursuit, only silence. In that silence, history shifted. The men of the Archer fish didn't know it yet, but they had just struck the largest warship ever built and the greatest symbol of Japan's pride. In the darkness above, the Shinano was dying, though her crew refused to believe it. Would you have taken that shot, knowing one wrong move could doom your entire crew? Comment 1 if you would have fired, or, like this video, if you would have held back. At 3:17 a.m., the ocean erupted. 4 of the 6 torpedoes fired by the USS Archerfish slammed into the Shinano's starboard side in less than 10 seconds. To the men aboard the carrier, the impact felt like the world splitting open. A low metallic roar shook the decks from bow to stern. Lights flickered, then died. Steel groaned and warped under the pressure as thousands of tons of seawater rushed through torn seams and unfinished welds. Below the waterline, the explosions had struck just beneath the ship's armored belt. The one place her designers had promised was invincible. The first torpedo blew open the forward air compressor room. The second smashed through the fuel storage tanks, spraying aviation fuel into the flooding compartments. The third ripped apart the auxiliary boiler room, tearing open bulkheads that had never been sealed. The fourth detonated under the number 3 engine room, bending the ship's keel and jamming watertight doors in their frames. The carrier's pumps roared to life, but many failed within minutes. Their electrical circuits shorted from flooding. Damage control crews sprinted through knee-deep water carrying wrenches, hoses, and hand pumps. Some tried to hammer wooden plugs into gaping holes. Others used mattresses and canvas to stop leaks, improvising as they went. The ship's internal communication lines had been left unfinished. Messages had to be carried by runners climbing ladders slick with oil. Every deck echoed with shouts. Flooding in Boiler Room 3, power out at pumps failing. In the darkened control room, Captain Toshio Abe steadied himself against a railing. He was an experienced officer, a veteran of the battleship Nagato, but he had never faced a wound like this. Maintain speed, he ordered. We will reach shallow water by dawn. To his officers, it sounded like confidence. To the engineers below, it sounded like madness. Increasing speed forced seawater through every unsealed joint. The faster the ship moved, the faster she drowned. At 4:00 a.m., the list reached 5 degrees. By 4:30, it was 10. Abe refused to slow down. He ordered the engine rooms to hold full power, unaware that several boilers were already flooding. A sailor later recalled, "The deck tilted so much that we had to crawl to move. Still, they told us to keep working." The men obeyed. They had no choice. Discipline was absolute even as the ship began to die beneath their feet. Outside, the destroyer escorts circled nervously, their crews seeing nothing but darkness and the faint glow of Shinano's running lights. They didn't yet realize that Japan's greatest warship had been mortally wounded. Inside the carrier, the situation worsened. Flooding spread to the port side, overwhelming counter-flooding efforts. Electrical fires broke out in the lower decks, fed by leaking fuel. The air reeked of smoke, oil, and seawater. By 5:00 a.m., the Shinano was losing power. Her pumps slowed to a stop. The list reached 15 degrees, her massive hull leaning like a collapsing building. In the passageway, sailors slipped on wet steel and vanished into flooded compartments. Many were trapped when doors jammed shut. Above-deck engineers tried to vent fuel vapors before they ignited, using hand cranks and crowbars to open stuck vents. They worked by flashlight, their beams reflecting off the oily water rising below. Still, Captain Abe refused to surrender his ship. "She will not sink," he told his staff. "She was built never to sink." Pride had become denial. His officers repeated his words to the crew, though most could feel the truth beneath their boots. The engines shuddered, then stopped completely. The carrier slowed to 10 knots, then 8, then 5. Finally, she was dead in the water. As dawn approached, a pale light spread across the sea. From above, the Shinano looked majestic, still enormous, silent drifting, but inside she was breaking apart. Compartments filled faster than men could bail them out. In one boiler room, trapped sailors clawed at sealed hatches until their fingers bled. In another, an officer wrote one last report in his log before the water reached his desk. Pumps failed, still fighting. He placed the book in a drawer and shut it. The destroyers radioed for permission to tow. Cables were fired and attached, but the weight of 70,000 tons tore them free within minutes. The escorts circled helplessly as the giant continued to roll starboard, her flight deck now slanting toward the sea. On board, the list passed 20 degrees. Mess tables and machinery slid across the decks, crushing men who couldn't escape. The ship's center of gravity shifted, accelerating the roll. At 7:00 a.m., the carrier stopped moving forward. The engines were flooded. The radio room fell silent. Fuel, oil, seawater, and debris swirled through the lower decks. Some men began jumping overboard on their own, ignoring the captain's standing orders to stay aboard. Others clung to railings, praying for a miracle that would not come. When the sun finally rose, it revealed the impossible. The world's largest carrier crippled and dying not from air raids or bombardment, but from 6 torpedoes fired by a single submarine. From the bridge, Abe stared toward the horizon. He could see Japan's coast faintly in the distance. He was so close. He whispered, "We will not disgrace ourselves," but fate was already sealed. Do you believe luck plays a greater role in war than preparation? Comment 1 if you agree, or like this video if you don't. By sunrise on November 29, 1944, the Shinano was no longer a ship. She was a wound, bleeding steel and oil into the Pacific. The world's largest aircraft carrier, once declared unsinkable, now lay motionless, her hull groaning under its own weight. The sea was calm, the sky gray, and the horizon empty. The destroyers Isokaze, Yukikaze, and Hamikaze circled like anxious guardians around a dying queen, powerless to stop what was coming. Inside the carrier, the decks were chaos. The list had reached 20 degrees. Sailors crawled along tilted passageways, dragging hoses and cables that no longer worked. Damage control officers shouted orders that went unanswered. The pumps were dead. The engines silent. Electric power failed completely at 7:45 a.m., plunging the ship into darkness. The only light came from flickering lanterns and the glow of oil fires spreading along the lower decks. The air was thick with smoke, choking the men who tried to reach flooded compartments. Captain Toshio Abe still stood on the bridge, his uniform soaked with spray, his face gray with exhaustion. Around him, his officers argued in whispers. The executive officer urged him to give the order to abandon ship. Abe refused. "We are the Imperial Navy," he said. "We do not leave our ship while she still floats." Pride, duty, and denial bound him to the deck like chains. The ship was already doomed, but he could not accept that a vessel so large, so heavily armored, could be dying from 6 torpedoes. In the bowels of the ship, men fought a losing battle. Compartments flooded faster than anyone could reach them. Water poured through the unfinished bulkheads, spreading from one deck to the next. The sound was everywhere, the rush of seawater, the creak of bending steel, the distant groan of bulkheads collapsing under pressure. "The ship is breaking apart," one engineer muttered, as he climbed a ladder that no longer led upward but sideways. At 8:30 a.m., the Shinano's list reached 25 degrees. The destroyers received new orders to attempt to tow. Lines were fired across the water, connected to the carrier's bow. For a moment, hope returned. Engines roared on the escorts as they strained against their cables. The tow line snapped within minutes. The massive carrier barely moved. Her sheer weight, 70,000 tons of wounded steel, dragged her rescuers backward. Aboard the Shinano, crewmen cheered briefly, then fell silent as the ship rolled another few degrees. The situation turned desperate. Sailors began throwing planks, life rings, and makeshift rafts overboard. Many jumped into the water on their own. The sea was cold, oily, filled with debris. Those who hesitated could hear the cries of men already in the waves. The ship's chaplain led a prayer on the flight deck, his voice trembling as he read from a small book that kept slipping from his hands. "We offer our spirits to the Emperor," he said. Some saluted. Others wept quietly. Below, trapped sailors banged on the sealed doors. Rescue teams tried to cut through with torches, but the rising water extinguished the flames. One compartment filled so quickly that men were pinned against the ceiling, their last breaths trapped in a pocket of air no bigger than a room. In another, a mechanic tied himself to a ladder and wrote a single word in chalk on the bulkhead mother. At 9:00 a.m., the list passed 30 degrees. The Shinano's vast flight deck now slanted toward the sea waves washing across its edge. Planes that had been partially assembled slid into the water, followed by crates, barrels, and debris. Officers gathered on the bridge, pleading with Abe to give the order. He looked at them one by one, then at the ocean, swallowing the horizon. "We will hold," he said quietly. "The armor will save us." It was no longer command, it was faith. Minutes later, the sound of tearing metal ripped through the hull. A muffled explosion shook the stern as trap fuel ignited. The ship lurched again. Men on deck lost their footing, tumbling into the sea. Abe finally nodded to his staff. "All hands," he said. "Abandon ship." The message spread too slowly. Many never heard it. By the time the words reached the lower decks, escape routes were already gone. At 10:18 a.m., the Shinano rolled beyond 30 degrees. Her port side lifted clear of the water. Her starboard deck vanished beneath it. The sea rushed across her hull like a living thing, pulling at every loose object, every human body still aboard. One witness from the destroyer Yukikaze later said, "It was like watching a mountain collapse." At 10:57 a.m., the Shinano turned completely over her massive flight deck, now pointing toward the sky. For a moment, she seemed frozen there, a monument to pride and tragedy. Then slowly she began to sink stern first. The sea swallowed her with frightening speed. In less than a minute, the largest warship on Earth was gone. A whirlpool of oil debris and human cries marked the place where she had stood. Out of nearly 400 aboard, only 1080 were pulled from the water. The rest vanished with their ship into the deep. From the deck of the Archerfish, now miles away and unaware of what had happened, the crew celebrated quietly. They had survived their attack, evaded pursuit, and lived to tell the tale. But they did not know that they had just written the final chapter of an empire's naval dream. The Shinano, meant to symbolize rebirth, had instead become a tomb. Do you believe the captain was right to stay with his ship until the end? Comment 1 if you agree, or like this video if you think he should have saved more men instead. When the last ripple faded from the surface, Japan's greatest warship was gone. The Pacific closed over her as if she had never existed. Within hours, word reached Tokyo, but not to the public. The Admiralty sealed every document, every radio log, every survivor's testimony. No mention of Shinano appeared in dispatches. The ship had been more than a weapon. She was a promise to the nation that Japan's Navy could still build something magnificent. To admit that the world's largest carrier had sunk on her maiden voyage less than a day after leaving port was unthinkable. So they buried the truth under layers of silence. The survivors were taken to naval hospitals in Yokosuka and Kure. Many were ordered not to speak even to each other. Those who tried to describe what happened were warned that breaking secrecy would mean imprisonment or worse. One officer later recalled, "They told us the Shinano never existed. We were ghosts of a ship that was never launched." The Imperial Navy called it a matter of morale. In truth, it was a matter of pride. The country that had once celebrated its warriors dying for the Emperor could not face the humiliation of losing 70,000 tons of steel in a single night. In Tokyo, senior admirals met behind closed doors. Reports were rewritten dates, adjusted ship names erased. Shinano's construction files were locked away under the label Special Project Number 701. Even among naval circles, few dared to ask questions. The empire was collapsing on every front. American bombers were appearing daily over Tokyo. Food was scarce, cities burned. One officer summed it up in his diary, "We cannot afford to mourn a ship, we are mourning an entire navy." Half a world away in the cramped war room at Pearl Harbor, Commander Joseph Enright sat before his superiors, delivering his patrol report. Fired 6 torpedoes, observed 4 hits on a large carrier-type vessel, he wrote. Analysts frowned. A large carrier, none were known to be operating near Japan. The intelligence officers assumed he had misidentified the target. The report was filed with a note claim unconfirmed. Enright and his men returned home to quiet congratulations but little fanfare. They had done their duty, but no one believed they had sunk a ship that no one knew existed. The irony was almost cruel. In Tokyo, a ship was erased from existence to hide defeat. In Pearl Harbor, victory was ignored because the enemy's secret had worked too well. For months, both sides lived inside the same silence, one ashamed, one doubted. Enright returned to routine patrols, never knowing that he had made history. In his journal, he wrote only one line about that night: 4 hits, then silence. It was not until after Japan's surrender in 1945 that the truth emerged. In a captured naval archive, American investigators found references to a carrier named Shinano, laid down as a battleship converted in secret, launched unfinished. When the records were compared with Enright's coordinates, the realization spread through the room. The USS Archerfish had sunk the largest warship ever built by any nation. Enright received the Navy Cross and his crew earned a Presidential Unit Citation. When told of the award, he reportedly said, "We never even knew her name." In Japan, the news was harder to bear. For the surviving crewmen, the revelation reopened wounds they had been forbidden to discuss for years. Many wept as they read American accounts of the sinking. The story of their ship told by the men who had destroyed her. Captain Abe was remembered with quiet respect. Some said he died standing on the bridge, saluting the horizon. Others claimed he went below deck to share the fate of his engineers. No one truly knew. What remained was silence. The Shinano's loss became more than a naval disaster. It became a symbol of the Empire's final illusion that faith could replace preparation, that pride could outlast logic. In the end, the ocean kept the secret until both sides were ready to face it. Only then did history reclaim the ship from the depths. Would you have kept such a secret if revealing it meant destroying national pride? Comment 1 if yes, or like this video if you believe the truth should always surface. When the war finally ended, Japan was no longer the empire it had once been. Cities lay in ashes, its fleet scattered across the seabed, and the great dream of naval supremacy had dissolved, the smoke rising from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yet among the ruins, one name lingered like a ghost: Shinano. She had never fired a shot, never launched an aircraft, and yet her story came to define the end of an era. The sinking of Shinano was more than a naval loss. It was a turning point in human understanding of war itself. For centuries, empires had measured strength by the size of their ships and the thickness of their armor. Bigger meant stronger, heavier meant safer, and steel was the language of power. But in one night, that equation collapsed. A single submarine, weighing barely 1/50th of her target, had rewritten the laws of warfare. 6 torpedoes costing roughly $6,000 each destroyed a vessel worth $70 million. 4 years of labor erased in 17 hours. The mathematics of modern war had turned upside down. To the Americans, the victory was proof of what industrial precision could achieve. The USS Archerfish had not won through brute strength or luck, but through patience, training, and technology. Sonar, radar, and mathematics had replaced guesswork and instinct. The submarine's commander had not needed courage alone. He needed discipline, calculation, and trust in his crew. Each man aboard was a product of a system built on efficiency, not emotion. That system, factories, blueprints, and standardized parts was the real weapon of the Pacific War. To the Japanese, Shinano's loss was a spiritual reckoning. She embodied the contradiction of a nation that built with faith but fought without fuel. Her steel represented pride. Her fall represented denial. The very armor meant to protect her had become her weakness. It made her heavy, slow, unable to maneuver, and impossible to save once struck. The engineers who had welded her plates together did not fail through ignorance, they failed through obedience. In their devotion to perfection, they had created a monument to a world that no longer existed. Naval historians would later call Shinano the last battleship of an old civilization and the first casualty of a new one. She died in the twilight between two ages, one ruled by steel and another ruled by code intelligence and invisible machines. From her sinking, a lesson emerged that outlasted the war. No fortress, no matter how vast, could survive in a world where precision outweighed mass, where knowledge outran power. In the decades that followed, nations studied the Archerfish's patrol report as a textbook. Naval design shifted towards speed sensors and systems rather than armor and size. Aircraft carriers became lighter, faster, and smarter. Submarines evolved into silent hunters, armed with missiles instead of torpedoes. The ocean had changed. The age of the supership was gone forever. But beyond tactics and machines, Shinano's story carried something deeper, a human truth. Pride builds slowly in years of triumph and faith. Collapse happens in moments. The men who built her believed that sheer effort could defy reality. They were wrong, but their error was not stupidity. It was hope misplaced in metal instead of reason. In that sense, Shinano is not only Japan's story, it is humanity's. Every civilization builds something it believes cannot fail. Every generation learns that nothing is unsinkable. Even Commander Enright understood that. When he was asked years later what he felt after learning what he had sunk, he paused and said quietly, "We never even knew her name." There was no triumph in his voice, only reflection. For him, the sinking was not about victory. It was about the price of progress, the way silence and patience could dismantle even the grandest illusions. Today, no photographs exist of Shinano at sea, only blueprints, fragments of steel, and the memories of the few who lived to tell her story. Somewhere in the depths south of Japan, 70,000 tons of rust still lie beneath the waves, a monument to ambition and to the quiet power that ended it. Her story reminds us that the greatest threats are often unseen, and that in war as in life, arrogance sinks faster than steel. If you believe technology and discipline can humble even the mightiest empires, comment 1 and subscribe to hear more untold stories of how industrial precision reshaped the world.